Welcome to Downshift, my name is Matt. This is the Mercedes-Benz G-Class, but more specifically, this is the full potency AMG G63. This is one of the most iconic shapes on the road today. It is a status of wealth and success, and it inspires envy into everyone you drive past. But is that because it's a great car, or is it because of the cool factor? Today we're hitting the highlights, the best and the rest, starting with the rest. Number one, and we're gonna get this out of the way right away, yes, it's tremendously expensive. But the fact is they only make a limited number of these cars per year, and everyone and their mom wants one. So it simply becomes an exercise of supply and demand. Now the non-AMG G-Class, the G550, starts at about $140,000. But the one you want is this AMG G63, which starts at $180,000. And yes, that's a lot of money, but the simple fact is these can sell for even more secondhand. I've seen G63s online with special paint like this satin white going for $250,000. So if you want one and you want the best deal on one, you probably should head to your dealership and get one from MSRP. You might just have to wait a bit. Number two is that you don't get MBUX here. MBUX is the technology suite that's been in Mercedes for the past few years now, and most modern cars like the new C-Class and the new 2023 GLC are running on an even updated version of that. However, this G Wagon still uses the technology that predates MBUX, but you still get an updated steering wheel and center controls, and you still get 360 cameras and Apple CarPlay and all those kind of modern things, so it's not like it's a horribly antiquated or out-of-date system. But if you want MBUX, you're probably going to have to wait for the subtle update that's coming to 2023, or maybe been pushed to 2024, that will also bring you a mild hybrid system along with your MBUX. Still a pretty good system, but just not the most modern one that Mercedes offers. And number three, it's not super spacious. This G-Wagon looks huge from the outside. It's big and imposing, but in reality, it's only about 3 inches longer than a Civic or a Corolla or something of the kind of like compact sedan orientation. So I still have decent room in the backseat here, but it's not quite as palatial as you might think from the exterior dimensions. Which means things like the rear seats won't have as much legroom as you might originally think, and the trunk is super tall and very practical square shaped, but it's not super deep. That said, this generation of G-Class is 5 inches wider than before, so it's a lot more spacious and practical than it was. Overall, this is still a totally practical and spacious enough SUV, but from the exterior, it gives you the feeling that it is so much bigger, and then you get inside and you're like, oh, okay, well, it's still big enough, but I expected it to be a little bit bigger. A little bit of a nitpick, but we move on. Now, number four, we talk about keyless entry. Now, this is a product of the door design itself. Now, these doors are some of the most unique in the industry today. They're super heavy, very old school, and you really have to slam them to get them closed. Now, something at this price, approaching $200,000, or on the used market, even $250,000, a lot of cars at that price have soft close, but this has hard closed doors. But something that's new of basically any price has keyless entry, where you can just touch the door and it'll lock or unlock itself. Not here though, got to use the key. And number five is the fact that you don't get a panoramic sunroof on here. Now this is interesting because this vehicle is shaped like a square, like a box, so you wouldn't think it would be difficult to put a panoramic roof on here, but you don't get it. And also, your sunshade is manual. Although that being said, when you option the sweet roof rack like you have here, you really don't have a use for a sunroof anyway. Now number six is fuel economy, and you get about 14 or 15 mpg combined here, which is obviously terrible, but what did you expect from your twin turbocharged V8 performance 4x4? And the reality is, if you can afford a G63, you can probably afford the fuel, but if you're more worried about the efficiency of something like this, there is an EQG fully electric G-Class coming soon. And the seventh thing is that the driver assist suite is pretty good, but it's not brilliant. I know I mentioned the G-Wagon doesn't get MBUX and some of the more modern tech features, but it's still a fairly solid system, and so is the driver assist system. However, the big difference here is that this car, basically against any other car out there, is using a hydraulic steering rack rather than an electric one. This means the other cars can use the actual steering rack and the steering inputs for the car to use that for the lane keep assist, to keep the car centered in its lane. The G has to use a different system. The G ends up having to use the brakes to keep the vehicle centered in its lane, or keep it from drifting outside of its lane. So if you're drifting a little bit to the left, then it'll brake the right wheels to get you centered back in your lane. It achieves the same effect, but it's interesting how it goes about it in a totally different way. Number one is the sounds that this thing makes. This SUV makes some of the coolest sounds in the game. First of all is obviously the engine and exhaust. Take a listen. Loud mode. I mean, who doesn't love that? But then the door sounds are pretty good too. Close, and then this is what it sounds like when you lock it. Pretty cool. Number 2 is the speed and the power. Now, followers of the channel will know that I have a huge sweet spot in my heart for AMG V8s. I love the power, the sound, the drama, the fact that they're all hand-built by a select few in a Falterbach. And this one is a familiar 4-liter twin turbocharged, hot V formation for the turbos, V8, and it's making 577 horsepower and 627 pound-feet of torque. But more than that, it makes some of the best noises ever to come off of a car, and it makes it right behind the driver and passenger side doors with the side pipes. That power goes through the AMG 9-speed transmission that I like so much to all 4 wheels, and this thing bucks when you launch it 0 to 60, and that's done in about the low 4-second range. In something that's shaped like a box, and it squats, and it does basically a wheelie on launch. It is the coolest thing, the most dramatic thing. And then while it's doing it, it's just yelling V8 noise at you. It's so much fun. And number 3 is the history. Mercedes has been making the G-Class for over 50 years now. It started life as a military vehicle, and now it's one of the most luxurious, sought after, and highly regarded vehicles on the road. And they're selling for $250,000 at times. I mean, for something that basically started as an Austrian Jeep. Amazing. And then number 4, I want to talk about the actual drama of driving this thing. Driving this thing is a special experience. You've got the speed, you've got the sound, and the way that it squats when you floor it, or brake really hard, or turn hard. There's just a sense of drama to the car. You sit up high, all of your windows are basically vertical so you can see everything that's going on around you, and you can look down on everyone from up here because you are sitting up so high. But even with it being so high, it's not like it falls over in a corner. You've got adaptive suspension, and you can stiffen up the damping right here on a button next to you in the driver's seat. I mean, I'm not gonna tell you it rides as comfortably or as deftly as something like an RSQ8 or a Cayenne Turbo, but this is way better than it used to be, and I smile way more behind the wheel of this G63 than behind the wheel of really any other SUV. This is fun. And number 5 is looks, and this is where I typically say, well, looks are subjective, but I think as a society we've come together and we can all agree that this is probably the coolest looking thing on the road. But for this video, I'm going to focus on the differences in the look between this G63 and the G550 I reviewed a few weeks ago. Starting up front, the face looks similar, but not the same. The brush bar is moved down to the lower bumper, not covering the grille. And then of course you've got your turn signals mounted on top of the hood like the G550. Around the side there are a few changes, like you get unique wheels, and this one actually comes with some wild wheels. They're gold Mercedes wheels wrapped in Nitto Ridge Grappler off-road tires. Pretty amazing. Your G63 gets red colored brake calipers, and then on your front fender it says V8 bi-turbo, not just V8. And then further back you have the G63 calling card, the side pipes, which sound epic, and you can make them louder in the cabin with the push of a button. And you can see all around the vehicle the black rain gutters. And then of course there's some badging on the back, but those are the things that make your AMG more unique than just your G550. Number 6, I want to talk about the interior, and more specifically some of the special components that make this cabin on this Mercedes G-Class so much more unique, special, and luxurious than any other off-roader on the market. Of course, you're surrounded by the nicest materials on earth, and we'll talk more about that in the next point. But you're also met with a gorgeous and practical design. You've got huge screens with modern tech. You've got an oh shit handle on your passenger side, which originally was probably for off-roading, but now it's probably because this thing is so fast. You've got stunning Burmester speakers. You've got some of the best ambient lighting in the game. I mean, just sitting in here, you're constantly reminded like, oh yeah, I am better than a Jeep or a Bronco, by like a lot. Number 7, I want to talk more specifically about the luxuries that you get here. Now, it's no surprise to anyone that your healthy 6-figure AMG Mercedes-Benz is going to have some of the nicest stuff available to you. However, let's remember that this thing started life as a military vehicle, and Mercedes has wanted to kind of keep some of that DNA as it's gone through over its 50 years. But you still get all the modern things you'd expect. You get heated and cooled front seats, you get massaging seats, you get a heated steering wheel, and you get heated rear seats. And of course, you're swaddled in rich and supple leathers, contrasted stitching, high quality aluminums, and carbon fibers. You're still surrounded by all of the luxuries and opulence that you expect from the pinnacle of Mercedes-Benz. And then I want to talk about the rear seats. And I know we kind of touched on this a little bit when we talked about the overall spaciousness of the car, but the fact is, you still have decent rear seats back here as long as you don't have super long legs. But you do have excellent headroom in here. You do get heated rear seats back here. You get your own climate zone and vents. You get chargers, cup holders, and pockets, and all of your usual stuff. So basically, as long as you have enough legroom, which I totally do, you can sit comfortably back here. I mean, I'm 6'1", and I can basically fit my whole fist in front of my knee. Not bad. And number 9, we'll talk about off-road stuff. We talked about this a lot actually in our G550 review, which is the more dedicated off-roader version of the two of these vehicles. But even in the more performance-oriented AMG G63, you still have one of the best off-roaders money can buy. You have short overhangs for approach and departure angles. You have a brush bar up front to protect the front end of the car, and you have a full-size spare on your trunk door. And then on your interior, you have 3 lockable differentials. You don't get that really anywhere else. You also have a low range for your transmission for crawling, and you have the oh shit handle for passengers when things get a little too bumpy on the trails. I mean, with some proper tires on this thing, this would go basically anywhere in the world. And if you don't believe me, I think Top Gear's done an episode with Patty McGinnis where he jumps a G63 pretty far and then continues to drive around Europe like it's nothing. I mean, this is an impressive vehicle, people. Number 10, I want to talk about the cool factor. Now, I try not to talk about subjective things too much here, and I try to keep things as objective as and factual as possible. But when you talk about something like the G Wagon, it carries a certain mystique to it, you know what I mean? As a society, we've kind of just determined that objectively, this thing is friggin' cool. I don't know anybody that doesn't think these things are cool. They may not like certain things about it, like some of the things that we talked about in the first half of this video, like the price or, you know, the doors that you need to basically go to the gym to be able to close. But even with all of its small flaws, I would love to have one of these, and I think basically everyone else would too. It's just really cool. So that's the best and the rest of the Mercedes-AMG G63. Now I know we had a lot of things both on the pros but also on the con side here, and some of those things on the con side are small little nitpicks or things that may not be a huge deal. And ultimately at the end of the day, what you're left with is something that is just overwhelmingly and intoxicatingly special, and there's very few cars on the road today that can be so special where I have no problem forgiving any little faults here. This is one of those experiences. It genuinely is really, really special. So thanks to my friends at Mercedes-Benz of Milwaukee for letting me have a go in their G63. We'll see you in the next one.